Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues and listeners and anybody new to the podcast, welcome, welcome, welcome. And this morning we've got Simon Elmore, who's an independent consultant now at the moment, and a very original name. It's the Air Cargo Consultant. So Simon, lovely to see you again.
You too,
and
Chris.
Thank you very much for coming on the show.
No, thank you. It's good morning, and I'm a little bit nervous, but hopefully I can bring some interest to the show. Always good to catch up with you.
Yeah, no, but I know you're of old, Simon, so I know it will be. So welcome. And now, before we start getting into a bit of subject matter, can you just tell us a little bit about why you called yourself the Air Cargo Consultant?
Yeah.
And what your focus is at the moment?
Okay, so the reason I call myself the Air Cargo Consultant, so TACC, is basically because the URL was available at the time, which I was quite surprised at, to be honest. But yeah, I set up a small kind of consultancy to look at best practice within air cargo generally. I focus on innovation, insight, technology, procurement, things like that. But I've kind of, through my past, I've kind of really looked at revenue accounting, optimization of that side of things, because in my 20 years in the industry, no one's really ever done it properly. And with the tight margins within, especially within TSOs or cargo ground handlers, it's becoming more and more important. So yeah, I've kind of general best practice, general business consulting, but linking a lot more towards the revenue.
Okay, and we'll come to that in a minute. Now, obviously, coming from a good solid background, I remember the LCC days, the London Cargo Company, and also Menzies and then Hermes. So do you want to give us a little bit of background of your pedigree and your experience?
So I missed the Lufthansa bit slightly, I think. I came just after the Lufthansa bit. But yeah, my first foray into air cargo was, I was at Brunel University and I got a temp job at London Cargo Centre in the accounts department. Yeah, there's some stories from back then, blimey. I can't believe that, you'd walk in and there was just a whole room full of airway bills, like literally floor to ceiling. So the filing hadn't really caught up with anything at that point. At London Cargo Centre, I was just temping while at university to pay my way through my degree. And then when I kind of graduated, I got offered a job, and that's when kind of Menzies came in to buy LCC, Concorde Express, Ogden, BOC, all of these kind of together. And I was part of the team that tried to merge the revenue accounting departments together, which again was pretty interesting when you think about the unionized stuff against other things.
Yeah.
Learned a lot through that period. And then I actually went traveling. So I was the deputy revenue manager of Menzies at that time. So around up until about 2002, 2003. And then I decided to put a backpack on,
like you do.
Could have done it probably before. Like you do, yeah. And I went traveling for 9 months, a year. I'd done a bit on the Menzies side for the Hermes implementation beforehand as a customer. And then when I came back, my good friend, and I think yours, Steve Montgomery, offered me a job at Menzies just to be kind of basically a junior business analyst. Spent 15 years there all the way up to COO level. Yeah, and then I've been consulting pretty much ever since. So
when did you join LCC?
It was between 97 and 98, I'd say, because I went uni first year was 97. I think I joined towards the end of the first year or maybe second year. So 98, probably early.
Was it 98? I was going to say, because I'd already left then and gone to, I was already in the States then. Just say it's a long time ago.
I heard your name back then, though, I think. Even then.
Even then, yeah. I hope it's good.
Yeah.
But you mentioned somebody, Steve Montgomery, well, probably one of the nicest men I think I've ever met, not just in the industry, but in my life. An absolute star of a man.
When I heard your first show, he was mentioned, and I rang him up straight away and I was like, Steve, because he retired a few years ago now, but he was basically my mentor. I think I've told you before, he was the guy that kind of made me realise you can be a leader, but also a friend. And I've got a lot of time for Steve. A lot of people have, I think, in the industry.
He's a cracker. I'll have to get his telephone number off you after the show.
Yeah, do.
Right, so you've got a good pedigree there, and obviously coming from the financial side, which everybody needs, and then through the structured side and the operational background as well. So one of the things that I'm trying to do at the moment is I'm working on a new normal formula, and some of the things that are so critical, especially now, cash flow, costs, margins matter. Now, you mentioned obviously our industry, and especially on the PSO, the cargo handling side, the margins are so low, and people must be worried now what's going to happen moving forward, and how a payment structure is going to be made. But I've always believed, and I think you're an advocate as well, of the old back to basics. If you don't do things right at the front end, and if you don't make sure they're being done right throughout the whole process, sometimes that margin differential is such that if you'd have done it properly and focused on the attention to detail, it could save you fortunes.
Yeah, 100%. So when I first kind of joined Menzies and got to a point where I could kind of influence change, even then I was building kind of small access database things to automate certain things, because back then you were lucky to have any extract from an operational system that informed what would become your invoice. So it was actually airway bills and manifests manually put in. So that's, let's say, 20 years ago. Now it's a lot better, and there's a lot of software out there, a lot of systems that have the power to do it. But my angle at the moment is data design. And what I mean by that is, you may have the tools to do it, but it's the application of those tools to really get value and what you want to achieve. So I think I've said to you before, my goal, probably life's goal, without really deliberately going that route, is to try to automate, all of the pricing within standard ground handling agreement, or all the pricing within your published terminal charges locally, your old 512Bs and things like this. And it's so complicated because of the commercial complications. And I'm really interested in the costs of implementing a new commercial structure to get business. What does that mean at the back end with the revenue accounts department in terms of what's my cost to actually implement that? I've got a fully automated system, but because you've agreed this, I've now got to hire someone to input data because it's so, let's say, complex. But yeah, in terms of back to basics, for me, the tools are there, but it's investing locally as a cargo ground handler to really understand how to implement it to save. You can save a lot of money and optimize your revenue at the same time. And it hasn't been done 100% perfectly in my time in the industry, for sure.
What's the saying? If you nobody can ever reach perfection, but if you chase it hard enough, you'll bump into excellence.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I agree with that.
What you were saying there about the data driven decision making, which is so important that it's accurate. But the thing that I always found is in basic you've got the 512Bs, or you've got your THC, you've got your tariff. So you've got a basic list of services. But in our industry and our business, there's always an exception or a promise or a flexible approach or something else. And to get some sort of algorithm that can actually identify that something has steered away from the normal, and then what is the cost of it, because there is a cost to all of these things. I mean, it's just like the basics. You don't go into a hotel and say, I'd like an extra bath or a bigger shower or whatever, without there being a cost to it. You don't go into a restaurant and you want baked beans on the side, which I do a lot. You don't ask for that and not expect to pay for it. So that sort of consciousness of people, that if they're doing something out of the norm, there's a cost to it, and how do you actually bring that in so that it's added up? And that's been one of the problems that we've had. We've always made things so complex.
And for me, it all comes down to people, like most things. Like I'm a huge technology advocate. I've been in software development and product management for the last 15 years. But it is the people and how you apply those things. So you hear even today, well, commercial have done X, well, it's commerce have done Y. It is that kind of creating. I'm a big agile advocate in terms of product development, but also in other things. So if you have a kind of a dynamic team with multi-facets that have control, which is revenue accounting, commercial department, operational management as well within that three, there's no reason really why you can't create, let's say, a commercial implementation strategy, which means that there aren't any surprises, that you say, in 2 months' time, I've got to backdate a tariff to this to try to recalculate because this 10-foot is now at the price that the LD3 was, or, I'm breaking my physical handling charge into 4 elements. Or, there's so many different complexities like that you hear all the time. And kind of my goal has been trying to say, well, this is the standard conveyor belt. This is all the stuff going on. How can we bring that all together and
Yeah.
improve the day-to-day life and
Yeah.
provide insight, basically.
Yeah. And I've got to say, every single every single organisation I've been to, and when you do audits or you do a bit of consultancy or whatever, one of the first things I always look at is revenue generation and revenue protection. And as soon as you can start to see, sometimes there's too much manual input, so you've got genuine mistakes, and unfortunately in this day and age you've also got orchestrated mistakes for whatever reasons. So there's a huge minefield out there to navigate through, but it's very, very rewarding at the end of it, because if you can tighten those things up and then you can automate those elements, it's a normal, natural flow then of protected or generated revenue.
Yeah.
So why do you think people don't spend so much time on it? Because at the end of the day, it's a common sense issue.
It's a good question, isn't it? I think it is that, that pound or euro or dollar that needs investment is stretched incredibly wide, and the original procurement of, let's say, the solution takes up a certain amount, and then the change management element, which obviously is the solution side, but the people side as well, and the departmental restructures and communication changes and things like that, internal advertising is often, dropped a bit. So I was involved in implementations of the Hermes system for, 15 years pretty much. And you always advocated that we can help you with this as a supplier, but in terms of people actually managing to do it, there's so many moving parts for them. It's a very difficult job. So if you can provide frameworks and kind of automated strategies and stuff, then that's a great thing. So I'm not sure exactly why. I think it's the easiest thing to drop. It's like training, mentoring, coaching. It's seen as kind of on the side, whereas actually my belief is you get that right first time, you won't be again looking at changing something 3 years, 5 years. You'll always look, but you won't need to as such. You'll actually see improvement. So I think it's one of those things. It's because it's a human quality, let's say, or a human focus.
Yeah, no, I agree. And having gone through lots of different upgrades and new models and new programs, I think, and I've spoken to some of the big boys about it, and we've had some of the guys on the podcast. But what I don't understand is it's almost like a split between the two groups. So within your operational unit, you identify people that are process gifted, and they're going to be your super users or your high impact team, etc. So they start to get to know everything that's going on. And it's almost like you can see the shutters coming down, because there's a point where they move from being an operational colleague to a semi-IT guru who's on a certain level, and they're talking in language that has gradually moved away from the common man or the common woman in the operation. And then you're told, yep, this is going to happen, and this is coming, and that's coming. And then the period takes so long that when the actual rollout or some of the pre-rollout exercises take place, most of the staff are bamboozled by it, and they can't work out why, or they say, well, yeah, but why aren't you doing this now? Because from the time that the commission takes place to the time of the delivery, so many other things change. So do you not think there's more of an argument now that things are done in modular, like building blocks, so that once you get something complete and it's a logical next step, do you, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not an IT wizard by any way. I'm not even a great IT user, but I just feel that there needs to be more of that approach.
It's interesting because you kind of brought up what became the super user. It's a term that's still used, isn't it? It's like the super user. And if we think of the super users within our industry, they are the person who decided to run reception, or the person who was most cared about the data on a manifest, or was checking up on things. And so they were doing quality control themselves as part of their normal role within the operational department or warehouse, etc. They became, and they were kind of taken. And to be honest, those people are quite rare. And I agree, the correct solution is probably to have something, and it always was the conceptual outlook of what I did especially, was you don't want a forklift driver to worry at all about any of these things. they want to be aware, maybe just so that they feel buy into the company, that what their work is valuable and they impact other things. But you don't want them worrying that I counted 2 pieces and not 1, and I want to, is that going to be a problem? You have to have the tools in place to understand that has to be consolidated at some point, hopefully automatically, at a different level. So yeah, the super user is an interesting concept. You also mentioned the modular side of things. So when you're thinking about modular training, implementation, services, etc., you have to look at the face-to-face, and you have to look at what people call e-learning.
Yeah.
I'm a big...
Especially now.
Yeah, even more so now, yeah, exactly, in terms of the virtual world being forced upon us, even though it was growing anyway. E-learning as a concept has got a pretty bad name, and the reason it's got a pretty bad name is a lot of people that design e-learning modules for specific worlds are not from that world. So I went to a talk recently in Brighton. My friend's a director of a creative services business, and it was basically a guy that was saying everything you know about education is wrong. That was his title of his of his show. So immediately I was attracted to do it. And his thing was that, and there was lots of people that developed e-learning modules, and they were from the tech and innovation and web content world. And he basically, one of the first things he did was started throwing marshmallows at people's heads. And they were like, what's going on here? And it was basically to kind of prove a point. And it was the thing that you most remember from educational experiences, which this was, is the interaction, the experience, the connection, the story. A lot of the times it's not the content. He had slides behind him, and he had a flow to what he wanted to talk about. What I remember and what he was trying to convey, and speaking to my friends after, was actually when you went off on a tangent, you had an interaction with someone that was unexpected, or something unexpected happened, and then that sunk in. So I'm a rugby coach as well, and I'm a big kind of advocate, or I'm just genuinely interested in how people acquire knowledge, and then how you can use that. So the modular approach to change management or training, it's not an exact science, and some people do it pretty well, some people don't. It's a whole new world that could be investigated, basically.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the marshmallow principle is, if he did, I mean, I'm sure he did, if he did it at the right time, you remember it, and that's how you remember the message he wanted to put across.
Yeah, 5 years' time. 5 years' time.
Whenever you talk about marshmallow, they'll remember that particular issue.
And it triggers other things. That's the other thing. Sometimes it triggers something that I think I might have seen on the slide, or a little quote or something like that. So yeah, I'm really interested. So how can you design those modular implementation training services so that someone walks away with a connection and experience? We learn through stories. So storytelling within air cargo sounds strange, doesn't it? But you get that right, someone will have buy-in.
I love what you've just said, and there's going to be people out there who are going to cringe, because I tell everybody, when you're starting a project, when you're starting whatever you're doing, you've got to have a story to it, because once you know the story, it's just like watching a film. If you've been to see a film and someone's read a book, you've got common ground. If you've both read the book and you've both read the film, you've got even more. But it's because you know the storyline inside out. And that's what people need to do, and they need to understand why. So what you were saying about the forklift driver, and some forklift drivers I've worked with, you know, they had some of the best ideas, because they're on the front line all the time, but nobody ever bothered to ask them or to tell them why something new was happening, so they could say, but have you thought of this, or what about this, you know? And so it's, you know, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to make it sound really easy, because to implement a new IT platform or program is a fierce task. But I just think that, you know, things now need to be a lot more collaborative, a lot more quicker, and you know, and more of a plug and play, because you've got so many different options out there, and it's a bit like these poxy phones that have all got their own different chargers and everything else. It drives me mad. And, you know, instead of just having one universal charger that fits everything, and then it's up to the, you know, the technical elements or the differences in the actual phone that are the USPs. That sort of approach, I think, is so important. And to create more marshmallow moments, I think that's what's necessary.
Oh, I like it. The alliterations were marshmallow moments.
Yeah, no, but I'm being serious, you know, especially now, where and we haven't touched. I mean, we could push this show out at any time, because one of the things we haven't touched on is this damn COVID virus, you know, and not taking anything away from it, but we've got to now start talking about the new normal and how we embrace it and what we do with it, rather than keep reflecting, God forbid, you know, even never to forget all the poor people that have lost lives and the efforts that have gone into it. But it's so important now to start doing things differently and to learn and not fall back into the old legacy of waste and bureaucracy and admin, and things have got to be done faster, quicker, so that the man on the street, same with politics, you want to be able to say, that's what I want to hear, it makes sense. And so much of the crap that's on the television now, and disagreements and conflicts, is just driving people crazy. So we've got to simplify, back to basics, you know, and marshmallow moments.
So bringing marshmallow moments back to a COVID world where air cargo, even more than ever, needs to be digitized and easily implemented. The worry or the problem that I've foreseen in my career is to make something simple is the most complex thing. And the time it takes to actually cater for the scenarios where a forklift driver who's doing pickups and drop-offs, compared to, you know, someone who's dealing with the airline representative, compared to someone in revenue accounts who has to backdate charges, is the scenarios are there. The data is now there, which we didn't have even, you know, 10 years ago. Really, we didn't have what they call the big data that we've got now. It's understanding how then to get to the next stage in terms of that kind of implementation. There was a piece an interview I did, I think it was in ACW, which was talking about a Yuldy knows it's a Yuldy, a door knows it's a door, a forklift knows it's a forklift, and through interactions, RFIDs, Bluetooth beacons, things like this, you have this automated warehouse. I think, as you said about back to basics, the first thing we need to understand is, especially in COVID, is how can you implement those things without having people on the ground for a long period of time? Even with, you know, digital systems that are implemented through software as a service within clouds, you still need the training part, the human change management part, the understanding of what's on the ground. You need to do a business analysis virtually to some extent. Now, how can you do that when we're saying that stories are the most important thing and knowledge is acquired through those things? So to create those e-learning, change management, knowledge transfer, knowledge base kind of modules as part of this, that's a massive gap in what needs to be done. And there is a huge advantage to be had to find how best that can be done. So how could you create a story to get someone from the operation who's been there 25, 30 years on board to know that this system coming in, which is going to change his life and probably annoy him a bit because him or her are coming towards retirement. What's the story to get that? How do you create that cultural, buy-in? Because that is what will be the success, and you have to do it virtually, completely, pretty much at the moment.
Yeah, but like you said, I think now one of the things that's come from the scenario that the world is in now is you see how much good people can do, and how well you feel when you see somebody do something good. So going back to, you know, letting people be people, and, you know, every single person will remember what it was like to be part of a team. It doesn't necessarily, like you like rugby, I love the sport, my son plays, it's a great concept, but any other sport, you know, and if it's a chess club, if it's whatever, it doesn't matter. As long as you're part of something that's more than yourself, you know what it's like to share something, you know what it's like to feel that win or that success. And we've got to go back to letting people be people again, I think, and letting them understand that to be part of something is much better than to wonder what's actually happening around them. And I think it's that not knowing why and just being told this is what's got to be done, and then you get some guru or some guy, yeah, no, this is the way it's going to be, blah, blah. We have to spend time now teaching people and spending time with people, because the anxieties that are going to come from people coming back in to the workplace after this, after this episode. And also now, I mean, every day there's a new set of thousands of people that are going to be made redundant. And that's something that so many people have never experienced before. but it's going to be part of life moving forward. So that storyline, like all storylines, it doesn't go from once upon a time to happy ever after. You have to come across the wicked witch or the black prince or whatever, and you have to overcome it because there's heroes or everybody gets together or whatever. So you have to go through those processes, but people have to learn or be supported in how you deal with them when they come up.
Yeah, exactly. And as you mentioned, I follow rugby, so rugby's been quite an interesting one. I was meant to be at the Premiership final in, is it 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
Yeah.
And it was basically just stopped. And they've just been allowed to go back to training, I think. So I'm a Harlequins fan because I used to be at Twickenham way. Yeah. And I've seen some videos of them going back to training and things like that. But their whole cultural identity is based on close contact.
Yep.
Literally close contact. So, but in terms of, let's say, the COVID scale, they've been training in their garden, where, based on the S&C coaches giving them things. Now they're training 2 meters away from a colleague. Even that is a huge boost for them. And if we're thinking about it from kind of air cargo, I've spoken to a few kind of, let's say, younger industry members who have kind of working from home for the first time for a long time. They might be with their family or, maybe on their own in a flat with housemates or stuff like that. It's a big change for them. And slowly they might go back to, if we're talking about the new normal being kind of semi or less people within an office.
Yep.
How is that going to affect them in terms of their mental health, their willingness or their feeling in terms of progression within their career? So when I first got into air cargo, I'm not saying it's like rugby, but it was very close-knit. That's why I'm still in the industry, is the people were pretty supportive, from the ground up, especially from the ground, to be honest. And how do you create that atmosphere because I know you like to promote people coming into the industry, especially young guys coming out of uni going, I want to go into air cargo. It doesn't happen a lot. How can we do that now where you haven't even got that, let's say, buzz of interaction, which a cargo handling shed can give you? I'm a little bit worried about that. But I think what it comes down to is leadership in terms of, I used to go to check in with my teams ad hoc when when I was actually COO. Even I didn't even have an office. I actually liked being part of the group. And I had enough of a relationship with people. They didn't think I was listening in to find out. It was more, I'm one of you. I won't ask you to do something I wouldn't do. That's kind of my idea. That's a very rugby thing as well. But how do you do that when half the team are at home? Let's say half the team. It's being done because most especially in software, most development teams, most QC teams are off-site. But I still don't think anyone's doing it perfectly. Like for me to just check in with you, I can't just walk around and say, can we have 5 minutes? I've probably got to set up a time on a FaceTime, on a WhatsApp, on a Zoom. Can we have 5 minutes? So it's definitely world changing, but I think it's just innovation within leadership can make it happen, I think. And yeah, you're right. You're cutting away some of the admin and the bump from the cost to get that kind of buzz. We can do it virtually. It's just, how do we do that is the interesting thing.
Yeah, and I think there still has to be a little bit of a balance. But one of the things that I think is, leadership is a luxury. It's not where people say, yeah, I'm a leader, or yeah. You know what I'm saying? It's very hard to find people who are actually leaders, who leave a lasting. There's a lot of people leave a lasting impression because of sometimes the wrong reasons, but to leave an impression whereby somebody says, that person taught me, or that person showed me, or that person explained why, because those are the messages that stay. And also to lead when you're not there, which comes into the virtual office or the virtual warehouse or the virtual finance room. Those sort of things are important. So there needs to be a new storyline written about the luxury of leadership, because once you experience a luxury, you don't tend to forget it, but it's not normal, for most people. So, and I think it's the same in the workplace, and there needs to be a lot more effort now into helping people become a new leader in this new normal that's going to come.
Yeah,
and a lot of that is down to good data-driven decision making, so that they can free up some of their time to then allocate to having group sessions, whether it's Zoom or whatever, but then having individual slots so that they almost like a performance or a relationship or a Marshmallow moment, a clinic or whatever, but things are going to have to be different in the future, because this is going to have such an impact on so many people. And for the first time, I think I can ever remember, I actually feel very, very sorry for a lot of the younger generation, because they've got what they've got in front of them now is uncertainty. They don't even have the dead man shoes that my generation grew up with, and you had to battle over that. But now they've got such uncertainty, and also people that were reaching a really, really good place in their career, or someone who took a promotion or a different direction, and now all of a sudden, for no reason for themselves, everything's been taken away. Yeah. And that's going to cause a huge fallout.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? To bring that back to what I've been doing recently is obviously the rise of, has always been there, but the rise of charter handling recently.
Yeah.
So I've been involved with a few customers in terms of charter handling is ad hoc. It's on request. It's multiple customers involved with the service provision. How do you automate that revenue-wise? Like how do you do that? So we've been looking at those kind of things. So there are new opportunities that come from disastrous events.
Yeah.
And it's just understanding or giving it a go. So the talented people within our industry, I'm pretty confident will find something within the new normal. And like you say, in terms of the ideas of anyone, should become even more valid. So we mentioned Agile earlier. In terms of software development, Agile is a big thing, and they have kind of small teams. And I'm a qualified a Scrum Master, certified Scrum Master, which basically means you're a servant leader within a team of people.
Yeah.
And all you're doing is facilitating that the eye of the end product or the end goal is not lost. That could also be done within an air cargo environment on the ground, which needs to be physical or virtual. You could put those kind of agile teams together. I've been sorry.
Yes, no, I was just going to say. So with that, and with what comes with it, with the scrum boards and having the regular meetings with the team and looking at the targets, I mean, that's something that most people who went through that process, they enjoyed the interaction with their teams and to see how they all understand the same layout, the same format, the same updates. But that could easily be adapted to a virtual scrum board.
Yeah, so the Kanbans and the Scrum boards and the daily stand-ups and things like that, which are normal within kind of digital product management now. Like I always thought, having even just access or pushed access, like nudge, they have this thing where you nudge someone, so that you know how well your company's doing. Like when I was at London Cargo Centre, for example, I didn't know how we were doing in terms of volumes, in terms of, I didn't want to know. I was in accounts, so I didn't really care about profitability at that stage, but are we up or down? That kind of information back then wasn't shared. If you share that information now as part of what will become the new normal, will that give people more buy-in, more pride in what they're doing, even though they're not seeing the people that would mentor or coach them face to face? Small pieces like that will definitely, I think, improve.
Yeah, no, I think there's incredible opportunities. Now, going back to the charter and what we were talking about, having some sort of an algorithm that was able to add up all the extras. If you look at the charter the way probably the way you and me remember, it was pretty straightforward. But now where you've had these praters, obviously it's not so much now, but where you had the praters and you've got ground handling organisation who've got to have so many more people involved in the handballing and transferring across a line to get the cargo into the passenger compartment. When you're doing that, okay, it's huge amounts of more people. Now, that isn't built in to any SLA or any contract, and those additional charges, they're not even considered, or there isn't that sort of understanding with regards to negotiations yet. When you look at some of the charters, I mean, over $1 million charters is, it wasn't that unusual a few months back.
100%. You've actually brought it back to the original point, which was kind of the data-driven insight decision making within, let's say, revenue accounting. Because so commercial come and say, I've agreed this charter handling for this set of flights or this set of aircraft or these days or whatever it is. it's probably based on a model from 10 years ago. It's not based on what's changed now in terms of even a full freighter of PPE. Does that add any complexities to anything in terms of what I do as either a ramp handling or a cargo handling? And yeah, I haven't seen much in terms of the changes in the structure. But what you do have is the customer is always right, obviously, and they will say, for this type, based on this rule, for this XYZ, don't invoice me, invoice so-and-so. So you come into like sub-customer, billable customer kind of requirements that, unless you're sitting there on a spreadsheet and basically breaking down a freighter one by one and moving things, it's a huge ask. So yeah, there's definitely advantages there to trying to understand the rules, and to also inform the decision makers in commercial literally what the next flight should look like from your commercial standpoint, and give them the data to prove why you have to change this element. That's what definitely don't do, for sure.
100%. Now excuse me, if you were doing like a health check and you know all these points, the way to convince people is obviously very different and very varied. What I think now, with the fact that so many people overlooked or didn't put as much focus on risk awareness, on business continuity, sustainability, you mentioned agility and resilience, all those things are going to be more important than they ever were before. And from a shareholder, from a board member, they want to know that their business is sustainable, rather than just floating above or, you know, sometimes below and then we get back up again. Now, how to change people's understanding of why something that should be looked at has to be looked at? And is there not an argument now within the storyline to say, let's identify where the critical risks are for the negative outcomes, and help people by addressing those critical areas first, then to important, and then to recommended? Whereas when so many of these projects and programs come into place, it's a combination. You have the full shopping basket of critical, important, and recommended, and people say, give me the low-hanging fruits, and people are talking about cockpit viewpoints and 20,000 feet, and I don't need to be on the ground and all this sort of stuff. Well, that's all got to change now. And even the best books and the best films, if they're that good, they always get remade and remodified and re-updated. And I think that the risk side of it and having that transparency is a way of creating a new storyline.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. Going back to probably my other kind of mentor, I don't know if you remember him. He probably doesn't remember me, to be honest, but Alistair Cooper was, I think.
I know. I remember Ali. Yeah.
Financial controller of LCC back in the day, and then Menzies. He used to come to me, and I was just a student at the time. I didn't really understand the business or anything. And he used to just bring a blank white A4 piece of paper and say, right, all I want at the end of the month, or he really wanted it end of week, end of day, is the status of the business from an accounting point of view for me to make decisions. Now, I've been involved in developing BI solutions. I've been involved in, let's say, kind of taking data out of huge cargo handling systems and trying to make, human sense of them. And we've come a long way. We've come a long way, but we still haven't got that right. So if I was revenue accounts manager, a financial controller of a shed, what I would want is that single screen that is in real time with very simple stuff. It's like yield trends in real time, for example. It's an ability to drill down on a yield to understand that, actually, there's a lot of minimums in terms of that handling. There's a lot of service freight on that. There's, the mail affects something in some way. And then, that just informs not just the kind of the revenue accounting process and the invoicing. It's the quality of that data which then informs the decision making. I still don't think we've got a lot of quality, even with IATA kind of global initiatives. There's still multiple systems with multiple standards, with multiple trigger points and timestamps, which mean some of what's reported locally, decisions are made without the correct thing. So that would be the goal in terms of what we're trying to achieve there, and then open that up to other people. Not the confidential stuff, but open up the quality and how you impact that quality overall. And we'll be fine. That kind of thing.
And again, understanding the risks and understanding the whys.
Yeah, exactly. The why is the key.
Yeah, and what you said there about so if you start from the back end, you're looking at performance, which is so important. Then you've got operations, then you've got your tactical influencing factors, and then you've got your strategy. So if you spell it the other way around, it's stop. And
Nice.
I don't think enough people at the right level stop and actually make new decisions based on what they've got in front of them, because in most cases, like you say, they haven't got the correct picture or the correct vision in front of them. There's a fog in front of it because there's too many variables.
Yeah.
And the amount of meetings I've been in when people have said, well, are you sure that's the right number? And well, yeah, because we got it from, no, the question is, are you sure?
Mm.
Everybody knows where the sources are and everybody knows who's put the input in there, but they don't know whether it's that accurate. And it's so important. And I think everybody now has been talking about, how many years strategy. That's all gone now. It's a short-term strategy. It's even short-time agility and resilience with tactics. You're in rugby. I've never ever seen a manager come in at half-time losing 10-0 and say to all the players, carry on what you're doing. Hopefully things will change. You've got to make, tactical changes. But that has to be based on the operational performance, which is triggered by the daily or the shift performance. Because if you don't address it at that quickest time, then as it goes up, it causes so much more problem.
Agreed. I like that. You're very good at getting those things. But even when you're talking to someone, you're getting this amazing. So STOP, I think one of the reasons the stop, of course it's across industries, a lot of these concepts, but I think one of the reasons the stop is quite difficult, and from my own personal experience, I can attest to this, it's because it's 24/7. It's because it's constant. So sheds are open 24/7, but I, for example, had customers, and I even now as a consultant, across the world, different time zones, different things happening, different requirements. I think it's hard enough to stop anyway, but to stop within what we see as this constant flow of traffic, maybe the COVID thing has helped people to go, hold on, and
that's the point. And just to bring it back to that, some of the things that have happened, if people had stopped quicker, or if they'd have looked at certain things that were happening, that why, with any modicum of common sense, would you think it wasn't going to come into your back garden if it's coming all over the neighbourhood?
Exactly, yeah. I won't get political, but yes, I agree.
Yeah, and me neither. But I tell you, there's some people who need their asses slapped as a result of some of the delays in taking action, because those actions would have stopped the whole financial wheels from running, etc. But the after effects of not doing it at the right time are terrible.
Yeah, agreed.
It's so important. And I've been in places now where, and yourself from running sheds and everything, that if you've got the human factor whereby you and me know each other and you're on the night shift and I'm on the early shift, and you give me the handover and you say, Chris, I'm so sorry, it's been a bad night and I've got 30 units still to break down and a couple of flights not even addressed and stuff. I say, oh, don't worry, Simon, I'll see how we go. Then something else happens that's out of my control. Now all of a sudden it's now escalated, and then you've got this dilemma of people not wanting to blame each other rather than just working on some really, really positive and accurate triggers that say, right, if this happens and it crosses the grey line, we need to do this. If it now hits the red line, you must stop and you've got to do these things. And that sort of immediacy helps people understand, because as soon as something goes wrong, you've got this blame culture everywhere. And I think now, even though it's such a difficult thing for people to understand the hard decisions that companies are going to have to make to survive, so that it's almost for the good of the remaining, it's going to be so difficult to understand that, because things have never been explained properly and basic business issues haven't been understood. And those people have done absolutely nothing wrong. So I think the level of anxiety and worry and concern that's also going to come back with the rapid ramp up is something that people need to be aware of as well, because it's that wave after the big rock has dropped into the tank. It's as those waves keep hitting the shore, are you ready to deal with all of those particular problems?
Yeah, it's a crucial time for industry, we say, leaders. But it's also advantage. You don't know what we said about making something simple is the most complex thing. The other complex thing is predicting the future. So
yeah,
and all we've got is data and human connection, and yeah, it's interesting times for sure.
yeah. So part of helping people keep every dollar, pounds, whatever currency, how to keep it where it should be, and also how to charge properly for the services in the first place and protect the revenues is a story in itself. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that, Simon. We're coming near the end, but I know there's also a subject that's close to your heart, and it's something that, you know, I've seen now with, you know, members of family and friends, and you know how worried people are about things going forward, about anxieties and fears, and you know these pressures that come on people. I know that's something that you'd be willing to talk about. That's correct, yeah?
100%, yeah. So I kind of mentioned the anxiety thing and the fear of the future, because yeah, I've kind of personally lived through. I suppose back in the day, you might have. I slightly broke, let's say. So the reason I said the 24/7 is I got to a point within my career I was working crazy hours, like a lot of us have done. I was enjoying it, but I was letting other things slip, let's say. And it got to a point where it crept up on me, where basically the reason I stepped down as the COO of a very successful market-leading software company is because of mental health issues based on, you know, those anxieties, or trying to work through connotations of decisions being made and too much data. So you have too much data. The world now, and we're saying about the young guys coming into the industry, there is too much data, and it's kind of, how do you convey that in a way that doesn't scare people, because a lot of it's probably nonsense.
Yeah.
How it gives them confidence in what they're doing, and it always brings me back to the human thing. It's like, my personal thing that I've learned through it all is about boundaries. You know, we talk about resilience, and it's resilience for me is creating boundaries where you have pride in what you're doing. I felt like we talked about teams, and the original team on the operations side, Steve Montgomery, Mike Smith, Lance Dupper-White, myself, we overachieved because of that commitment. Yeah. But personally myself, I probably bought into it too hard, where I forego certain things that affected my mental health, let's say. So yeah, I'm really interested in that, especially within the COVID-19 environment, is, yeah, especially the young guys coming in. I was actually up to under 16s levels for rugby, so they're a bit older than that in the workplace. But yeah, I'm really interested in terms of what you can do to facilitate these guys developing into the people they could be, and being confident about, you know, getting there. So yeah.
If you don't mind, I'd love to have a separate podcast on that particular subject matter, because, you know, I think if people know that something similar to what they're feeling or what they fear has got some sort of reference or experience, you know, maybe it'll help some people. But you know, certain things are going to be on everybody's table within the next 6 months, and it's a meal that, you know, that I think a lot of people won't be prepared for, and it's not, you know, it's not fair if you look at it from life's perspective. So maybe we can sling some marshmallows out and make some moments.
Great. So I'm going to have to tell my friend that, because he'll be very happy. Because yeah, the one thing I'd definitely be up for doing that, because I'm genuinely interested in it, and obviously I'm continuously learning and trying to improve. But the one thing I'd say is, I had a brief chat with you, I think, a few weeks ago about this imposter syndrome thing.
Yeah.
Basically, even you look at a COO, I was a COO, you look at an MD, you look at a guy at the top of the tree, or a lady at the top of the tree, and you're looking up at them. They're exactly the same as you. And that's what my form of, I don't know, leadership is making that connection for them to understand that I came on here, I've known you for a long time, I still got a bit nervous. You know, everyone's human, and, you know, maybe that's part of the story or whatever. And it's kind of, yeah, I'd like to get that across, that, you know, people were, why did you step down? It was such a successful, you know, this, I know. It's not about that. It's really not about that.
But no sometimes you have to stop, and it's whether it then becomes a strategic or a tactical or an operational decision. You do it, And if you consolidate, just like rugby, you know what I'm saying, sometimes you've got to change your tactics mid-game because your strengths aren't where you expected when you had the strategy for the game. And it takes a very brave person, and it takes a very sensible person to know when to stop.
Yeah,
so I think, I think maybe we'll call it stop. That we should definitely do another session. I've always enjoyed the interaction. I think you're a super intelligent young man, and I look forward to speaking with you again. Wish you every success, and I'll definitely keep in touch. And you've got the world not so much at your feet, but it's over your shoulder. So, there's an awful lot of scope there, an awful lot of revenue generation and protection that can be sorted out there.
Yeah.
I wish you great success, Simon, and thank you so much for coming on.
No, thank you, Chris. I've really always enjoyed catching up with you. I'm just going to go get some marshmallows and start throwing them somewhere.
That's it. Yeah.
Cheers,
Take
Chris.
care of
Have a good day.
Cheers, and you.